Um, these were posted on the city website. So I suspect most municipalities will do that, and if they don't, call them up and ask them, you know, how can I get involved? You know, we're at every naturalization ceremony, and we register usually about 85 to 90% of the people that are becoming new citizens. And you know, we want to encourage them to get involved in their communities, especially as new citizens. And I was at one presentation up in Brooklyn Park one evening, and they were talking about the mechanics of voting and with a group of new citizens. And the city manager just got up and he was like, you know, we want you to, the open invitation, it was really heartwarming, because it was really the first time I'd seen a public official just get up and say, we want you to be involved. And you know, that's what a community is. It's collecting the varied voices that are represented and making sure that they're heard.
I have a question. So this is a two-part question, and selfishly, these are some questions that advocacy as a committee are really trying to attack, but are there any legislation, is there any legislation that you most advocate for that you really just want to tell people about? And then is there any legislation that you think people should know more about that relates to the achievement gap, which is a cause that our group is very interested in?
And I have to say that our office is really focused on voting rights protection.
Okay.
So we have members who are monitoring the education gap. I can't say that I can speak to that directly because my focus is on voting rights. But Restore the Vote, 47,000 Minnesotans currently don't have the right to vote because they have a past felony record. And in this state, while we don't incarcerate for very long periods of time, parole sentencing is really long. And so there are people who serve their sentence and are put on paroles that last 20, 30 years. And yet they're working, paying taxes, raising families, and they're not able to vote. And there are just, you know, they're just very compelling stories where these individuals really feel like they can't be fully integrated into the society. And so we really would like to see that change. The issue has been the House leadership has refused to hear the bill. We've been at this for 8 years now. And depending on how the election turns out, we may be in a re-education phase, because a lot of the House and Senate is being turned over. They're open seats. And so that will require us to really re-educate and hopefully get them on board. But it's one of the largest coalitions in this state has ever seen in terms of representing a continuum of viewpoints. I mean, we're down at the libertarian end all the way to the far left, and it truly is a denial of civil rights.
And this might be a silly question, but I think it's worth asking. I think a lot of our members don't necessarily know what it means to be on parole. What does that mean? What are the restrictions? Why is that such a challenging place to be in for a person going through that situation?
So a person on parole is somebody who has to check in regularly with their parole officer, making sure that they're meeting the terms of their parole sentencing, and that can vary, depending on what the crime was and whatever. But our system is complicated by the fact that, particularly people on really long paroles, the parole officer often loses track of, when they should be off paper, and then when they do get off paper, off parole, they're not necessarily informed that yes, your right to vote has been reinstated. So what we're trying to do is create this very clear line, so that when you walk out of jail or prison, your civil rights are completely restored. There's no question. We are going to be, our coalition, Voting Rights Coalition, will be working with a number of attorneys on election day, so that if somebody who has a felony record is in any doubt as to whether they can cast their ballot or not, we'll give them the 800 number, and those attorneys will have access to the records so that they can say to them with certainty, yes, you can vote, or no, you can't.
This is more, oh, no, this is just more out of curiosity, but as a leader of a nonpartisan group, can you individually contribute to a candidate or endorse a candidate, or you're completely neutral?
Our policy as an organization is that anybody with great visibility does not caucus, does not participate in our candidate forums, does not contribute. Their husbands can contribute. I can't put a sign in my lawn, so I stay completely out of the system.
How far the organization does that?
Well, we ask so for the local leagues, the president, voter service chair, I would say anybody that has great visibility, that they use their best judgment, because that's what calls into question our non-partisanship, and that's such a core value for this organization that I don't want to see that threatened in any way. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so I am new to the whole, like, learning about legal things. But the part that you talked about writing a bill and educating sort of all the legislators and that kind of thing, like, what does that look like? Who writes the bill? How do you get it in front of people? How does it get voted on? How does that work?
Well, it depends. So in the ordinance that I wrote, I wrote the ordinance. We had a committee. The commission looked at it, we tweaked it, and then we brought it to city council,
Okay.
and then they voted on it. Larger bills that go to the House or the Senate in this state often are generated by people just like you, who go to your legislator and say, I need a law that says this. You'll often hear when, like the Jacob Wetterling, a lot of laws were written around child advocacy needs that were vacant. And so the Wetterling family and their foundation came in and supported, legislation that was written. It's then led by a few legislators, and they take it into committee, and then it goes into committee, the various committees, depending on what the topic is. It may hit one committee, or it may have to be heard by several different committees. Once it goes through the committee vetting, then it can be put to the floor.
Okay.
And then each house looks at it. Typically, there are companion bills that are from the House and the Senate, often mirroring one another. Yeah.
I have another question about what you were talking about, like voter fraud and how like things are decentralized and it's not online. So I always think like, oh, it would be so much easier, like you said, if people just turn 18 and they go be registered, and then if you would just vote online. But
Well,
then what you were
yeah, voting online, actually, I'm not in favor for. I like the paper ballot because it's a safeguard.
right.
Having that receipt is really important. And as we're seeing in this election cycle, there's a lot of hacking going on.
But that doesn't mean that you could still decentralize that. You could have it going to like different servers.
Potentially, but I think, and I think the day will come where people do vote online, but I think that some kind of paper record will have to accompany that. I think those groups like the League would advocate that there be a paper receipt of some sort.
But if you receive like a text on your phone, that could be a receipt. I mean,
Right, but a centralized receipt too, because then you're going to have to collect all these receipts from individuals. So, I mean, it would have to be a system where, right now the paper ballot is collected and, securely locked away. And so we want to make sure that whatever receipt system there is, that it's a secure system. So I don't pretend to know all the ins and outs of,